guys for later in the week. But first, we got to get to this because, gentlemen, we are 1 week away from free agency, which means between that and the draft, it is also trade season. Ben Simmons, of course, a name that's been on the lips of a lot of front office folks around the league. In fact, WOJ reporting trade talks around Simmons are expected to indeed heat up this week. So, Tim, what is the best situation for Ben Simmons? And on the flip side, your old friend Daryl Morey, in terms of the Sixers, what they want to get out of this?
The situation, the scenario that's always made sense for me is some sort of C.J. McCollum for Ben Simmons framework. And they can argue about, who has to throw in what. But I think C.J. McCollum would give the Sixers that scoring kind of secondary playmaking guard who could really help Joel Embiid. And I want to see Ben Simmons in more of a Draymond Green role. Stop putting him in a position where he's the primary playmaker, where he's the point guard. Let him be that secondary playmaker, that power forward with Dame Lillard, an elite, obviously deep range shooter, pick and roll player, great leader that I think could help get his confidence up. Of course, the problem there is how much longer is Dame Lillard going to be in Portland?
Mark?
Well, David Fredman, I don't know if you guys know him, a longtime NBA executive, told me once, he'd never get too high or too low about how somebody plays in the postseason. I think Ben Simmons is still a great player, will be a great player. He's in Los Angeles right now, working with a Clutch Sports appointed shooting coach. Here in the Sixers are getting a shooting coach as well. He's in good mental spirits, working on his game in LA. He didn't get a lot of time with Doc Rivers. There was no training camp, pandemic shortened season. Just throw
that in there too.
I think you got to run it back with Doc. I know Doc likes him a lot. And see what happens the second time around. I think they need more time together.
Doc didn't like him too much in his post-game press conference when they got eliminated. Joel Embiid did not exactly indicate some eagerness to run it back.
In terms of Embiid, you don't hate on your teammate, man. I don't like that.
But he did, and it's his franchise, and we've got to recognize those as realities. Is
that the kind of leader you want to play with, though?
Listen, I'm
teammates' legs out when he has a bad series.
We can discuss blame, but I just think that it is in the best interest of all parties for Ben Simmons to be playing elsewhere sooner than later. And whether a deal that makes sense materializes now or during the season, I would be surprised if he's a Philadelphia 76er next postseason.
Okay, but that begs the question then, Tim, and I don't disagree with you that, hey, it might be nice to get that clean palette, but at what cost, right? Because Mark's right. The playoff performance Ben had, it left a taste in enough people's mouths that it's a little bit of a sell-low situation. And if you're a franchise, you don't want to be in a sell-low situation. So, Mark, how would you balance those things? How would you balance the idea of getting a fresh start with your team right from the beginning of training camp? If you do bring in someone else for Ben, having Ben out of there, having this new person in there, being able to work the whole season and get some cohesion for the playoffs, versus the fact that you will just probably not get the value for Ben Simmons this week that you would 3 or 4 months into the season when people have gotten the chance to see him work again and succeed the way he did during the regular season last year.
Yeah, no, the Sixers haven't had enough time to take a deep breath and really see if this is something they want to do and not make an emotional decision. I'm sure there's a lot of teams that would love to have Ben Simmons and give that maybe Ben feels like it's time for me to go and try something new. But I think people need to just calm down. I mean, this dude is still a pretty great player. He had a bad series. Have some patience with it. That's just me. I don't know. Maybe I'm an optimist.
And we're back to panic or patience again. Here's the thing. And you don't want to sell for pennies on the dollar. You do need to get star value in return. And you can't, it's not about picks because you're trying to capitalize on Joel Embiid's prime, but you can't be too patient when you have Joel Embiid, one of the top 3, 5, make that argument, whatever, players in the NBA in his prime. You've got a window you've got to capitalize on. And I just think they've reached their peak with Ben Simmons as his co-star.
It'll be very interesting to see not only what move they make, but when they do it. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. You will be all over ESPN's NBA coverage all week with the draft and free agency coming up because there's like 6 teams that you are in charge of coverage for our NBA group. So thank you for your time today, and we'll see you not too long from now.
Always a pleasure.
All right, everyone else, stick with us.
tears ACL. We don't know when he's coming back. He could miss the whole season. We just need to acknowledge it. Is there any Kawhi Leonard leaving the Clippers possibility? What do we know? Because I don't care if he's injured. Teams will line up to get. We saw with Kevin Durant. If you're a top 5-6 player, teams are going to line up to get you, even if you're going to be out for the season. Maybe. What do we know about Kawhi?
I've gotten no indication that Kawhi Leonard is interested in doing anything but re-signing with the Clippers, rehabbing that injury. And you talk to other teams and agents who might be talking with the Clippers. The way they're proceeding certainly seems to be with Kawhi Leonard in mind. And listen, you don't know until a player signs that contract, but you just said it's an ACL. And there's an expectation that he could miss next season. You tear your ACL in the playoffs, especially in a season where we're pushed up against next season a month later, like they can't assume he will be on the court next year. So they've got to proceed accordingly here in free agency and at the draft with their own players. But I don't have any sense that he plans to do anything but to continue forward with Paul George and that group.
So if it's status quo in LA with Kawhi, and the current intel best we have is it's going to be status quo with Damian Lillard in Portland for a while. I don't think that deal, as of now, that doesn't appear to be something that's happening this offseason. That leaves us with the other big name that we've got to mention that will absolutely be in play this offseason, is already in play right now, and that's Ben Simmons in Philadelphia, which is the other obvious Beal team that I mentioned. This is a very complicated situation. His value, I think, is at an all-time low after just a really bad series against Atlanta where it looked like the free throws and everything was in his head. He passed up that dunk in Game 7 that was just, frankly, jarring to see. What's the latest we have on Ben Simmons?
The Sixers are engaged out there in trade talks, and they're taking on offers, they're making offers around the league. They're trying to get a sense, listen, who's the best possible player they can get back, because they're doing a trade to want to continue to be a championship contender. Like, they don't have to they can't be in of a mindset, and I don't believe they are, of we just have to move him. He's got 4 years left on his contract, and they can't overreact to that Atlanta series.
4 ironclad years, no options, no nothing. 4 ironclad years.
Which means he really has no leverage in where he could go. If you trade for Ben Simmons, you've got him under contract. He's going to come and play, and that opens up the landscape of teams. But I think it will be serious this week. And they're certainly, if there's a deal out there, they're going to do it. But they also know they get one crack at this, and making the wrong deal, it takes them out of championship contention with Joel Embiid in his prime. They've got to be really careful. But Daryl Morey, like, it is hard for him to, when there's a deal to be had in the air, no one loves making big deals more than him.
Well, they went after Harden and didn't get Harden, and everyone thought, well, if they don't get Harden, Beal's the next logical target. But I think a name that's really interesting as an inflection point is C.J. McCollum in Portland. A Simmons for McCollum swap, who has to throw in draft equity, they'll argue about that. But that has made theoretical sense. Theoretical, I say, because McCollum comes to Philly, and he's the guard that they don't have. The shooting, playmaking threat fits well with Joel Embiid. But then if you're Philly, you start to say, well, boy, that puts a lot of pressure on Joel Embiid to carry the defense almost by himself. And we saw what happened to Rudy Gobert in the playoffs when Utah built that kind of roster with them. And as you said, they don't want just anybody for Ben Simmons. They want an all-star player for Ben Simmons. And CJ is a very good player. He's never been an all-star team. When they look at Portland, they see the other guy.
They want the other guy.
They see the other guy.
Who's not available.
And say, we want that guy, which to me makes it for a very interesting situation. If the Sixers can get a guard some other way, just in theory, if they can sign and trade for Kyle Lowry, then they can look at their team and say, okay, we've papered over one need. What if we keep Simmons, see how he functions in this ecosystem where we have a legit lead guard, ups his trade value, see what happens in Portland, see what other situation goes haywire around the league, because something always goes haywire somewhere, and see what Ben Simmons' trade value looks like in January, February. I think that frankly makes a lot of sense.
Zach, I think more than anything, the fact that Simmons has 4 years left on his contract means that the Sixers don't just have to do
names on the trade block and in free agency, starting with All-NBA, All-Star Bradley Beal in Washington, and some other big names too. Come back with us on the Woj.
To give them 5. Straight up, get rid of him. He's so petrified of shoot. Everybody and their grandmother's been telling you to shoot the basketball.
A lot of things are being said. It hasn't come from me. I haven't made any firm decision on what my future will be.
Are you frustrated?
Is the sky blue?
Welcome back to the WOJ and Low Special, presented by Kia.
Welcome back to the Woj Low offseason extravaganza. We hit the draft now. Woj, let's go to the biggest veterans that could be moving, maybe moving. Who knows if they're moving? And it has to start in Washington with Bradley Beal, who's entering the last year of his contract, coming off a sensational All-NBA 30-plus points per game season. Where do we stand? Again, we're 4 days before the draft. Like, if they're going to make, anything's going to happen, there's got to be a little clarity soon. Where do we stand with this?
Bradley Beal has not told the Washington Wizards that he would like a trade. He has not told them anything, but he is invested in helping them in free agency. And, he's obviously gotten a chance to talk to Wes Unseld